Hello and welcome everyone. In this chapter, we are going to discuss about router on stick. So this is a second way to configure the inter-VLAN routing. So let's get started with the same. So far, if you remember, we have discussed one of this scenario in our previous video, and this is what we have, where you can see we have this switch, and the switch has the VLAN 10 and VLAN 20, and respective of the PCs are connected to the each VLANs, and we have got a router which is connected to your switch, which is basically port number 4, and port number 4, if you can see, this is basically part of the default VLAN 1. So now when it comes to router on a stick method, what exactly we are going to do? We'll discuss it. So far, if you remember in legacy 1, in legacy, what we was doing, it was like you need to take the separate cable and connect with the router for each and every VLANs. Like if I have 2 VLANs, I need the 2 separate cable. If I have 10 VLANs, I need the 10 separate cable, which is basically a drawback. So just to avoid the same, what we are going to do now, we are going to say that, hey, this is basically a separate physical cable, correct? No, this is basically a separate physical cable. This separate physical cable will be now gets divided into logical cable. It's like you are going to divide this virtually in sub interfaces, and make sure sub interfaces is nothing but, let's say this is physically fast Ethernet, let's say physically fast Ethernet 0 by 0. So what you will do now, fast Ethernet 0 by 0 dot 1 and fast Ethernet 0 by 0 dot 2. Dot in the sense it is a sub interface. Logically we have break down this physical interface into virtual interfaces now, and your FA0 by 0.1 will be, now you can say it will carry your, let's say, VLAN 10 traffic, and this will carry, let's say, your VLAN 20 traffic. In simple term, you are going to associate like this, and the major part will be you need to configure the IP address on this particular interface, and this particular IP address itself will be considered as the default gateway for your PCs. For example, like this, default gateway will be like this, and here default gateway will be this. Done. And once it is done, see what exactly we have done right now. In routers, we have divided your physical interfaces into sub interfaces. Okay, your single physical interface can be divided into multiple sub interfaces based on your number of VLANs. If you have 2, 10, 50, 100, you can divide, there is no challenge. This is the point you need to configure in the router. First, your sub interfaces, and configure the IP addresses for respective VLANs. And in the switches, you need to go ahead, create your VLANs. I mean your layer 2 configuration, create your VLANs, and then you configure this particular port number 4 as a trunk port. You configure your port number 4 as a trunk port, and after that you are good to go ahead and have the communications. So just to recap, what exactly you need to do, you need to perform the layer 2 configuration first. Okay, you need to confirm the layer 2 configuration is nothing but you need to create VLANs and assign the ports, and also you need to go ahead and configure the trunk. Once it is done, you will come back to layer 3 configuration, where you will say to create your sub interface, you need to create sub interface, and then finally you just need to enable the IP routing. Done. This is basically configuration point of view. Just enable IP routing. Later on you can go ahead and communicate this from source to destination, and communications will take place. So what is router on a stick? Basically, the router on a stick is all about dividing your single physical interface into sub interfaces, is called as router on a stick. That's it. So far, I hope this scenario is clear to you. We will see the same router on a stick demo in our Cisco packet tracer as well. So let's see a couple of more points in the slide deck, and then we will see the demo as well. Let's move ahead. So far, say this. So as we discussed inter-VLAN routing, using a single physical link itself that you can go ahead and perform, of course, yes. Make sure it uses the routers to perform the inter-VLAN routing. And the physical interface of the router is divided into one or more sub interfaces, and one or more sub interfaces will carry the traffic of your each VLANs. Very important. Using single link and creating sub interfaces is basically called as router on stick. So very simple. Using single link and creating sub interfaces is called as your router on stick. Make sure each sub interfaces is configured with the IP addresses for VLAN it represents. So if you remember, for VLAN 10 you configure the same range of IP address for sub interface. For VLAN 20 you configure the same range of the IP addresses for the same. Okay, that's very important. So far this is again the example of the same you can see here, where you have VLAN 10, 20 and 30, and we are using a router here, and this is basically your single physical link that we have divided into the sub interfaces, and this must be configured as a trunk so that it can go ahead and carry your traffic from one VLAN to another, and it can allow the communication like this. Okay, so that's very important. How to configure, what exactly to do? As I said, in this particular switches, this is your layer 2 configuration, where the first job will be to create your VLANs and assign the ports and configure the trunk. This will be your job here. After that, in this routers you need to configure the sub interface, and you need to just enable the IP routing. Just create sub interface and IP routing. So this is something which we know that already. When it comes to routers configurations, what you need to do is this. See how to create the sub interfaces in routers. In the routers you need to configure, in configuration mode you need to say interface fast ethernet 0 by 0, and then you need to use dot and then number like this. Interface fast ethernet 0 by 0 dot 1. If you use this dot 1, it will be considered as sub interface. And then encapsulation dot 1 q, and then VLAN ID like VLAN 10, and then IP address is like 192.168.1.100, and then subnet mask, and finally end. Like that, you need to configure one more sub interface, fast ethernet 0 by 0 dot 2 for VLAN 20, and the IP address will be 192.168.2.100, and after that you need to enable the IP routing. That's it. This is only your layer 3 configurations which you need to perform for the router on stick. So make sure in the routers you need to configure the two sub interfaces, FA0 by 0.1 for the VLAN 1 and FA0 by 0.2 for VLAN 20, and the IP addresses also has to be from the respective range of the same. And finally you configure the IP routing, just enable it, and your communications will take place from your source to destination itself. So that's it. This is how you can go ahead and configure the router on a stick. You can go ahead and verify the routing table into the router itself, and by using this routing table only, your routers will allow the communication from your source to destination. Okay, so that's it for this particular lecture. I will see you in the next lecture with the demo. Thank you. See you.